Today I'm with two cars that seem to be in categories heading in complete opposite directions. On one hand, both of these are electric vehicles, which are very much on the rise. On the other hand, they're both sedans, and more sedans seem to be getting canceled every other week or so. So the question is, in 2024, if you are in the market for an electric sedan, which of these would be a better fit? Ultimately, that's up to you, but let's go ahead, dive in, do some comparing, and see what we come up with. Before we get too far down the road, let me go ahead and start by addressing the fact that this is not a 2024 refreshed Model 3. This one happens to be my personal 2023 base Model 3, and as far as where it fits against the 2024, the differences are more few and far between than they are abundant. I will start by saying that definitely the aesthetic is one of the biggest changes, so when we get to points like the front and rear end, I will go ahead and highlight those, put up some pictures so you can see how it compares versus that i4. But by and large, the shape, dimensions, cargo capacity, efficiency, those sorts of things are all going to be very similar. Since these two vehicles fall into the same category, it's reasonable to assume that they are similar, or maybe related. But that relation would be third or fourth cousins twice removed at best, and all it takes is a quick look to see the difference. This one is taller, this one is more aggressive, but the differences are actually not as big on paper as you might think. The fact of the matter is that this is taller by a hair, and this is longer by a few inches. And as far as width, well, they're basically the same. But the fact is that this was designed from the ground up to be an electric vehicle, and this is a converted electric vehicle, which is not to say that it's not still a good electric car, it's just got some compromises. But one thing not compromised in building this is the generally attractive traditional design that you get with a BMW. And over here on the Tesla, well, you get more room, but one of the trade-offs is that, well, it's going to look like this if it's going to have more room. And this might not be everybody's cup of tea. Now at this point, what I'll go ahead and do is put up a picture of the refreshed Model 3 rear end, but I'll also make it the performance version because that's the best comparison to this i4, which is the performance version. It's pretty easy to see some of the performance bits that we get on here. We have a carbon fiber spoiler, we have a rear diffuser, and a few other carbon bits. But one of the big differences is that even just from eye level, you can see that this trunk lid falls a couple inches shorter than this one over here. And it's a much steeper drop off from the rest of this than the i4, which is much more of a slow slope, where this one falls off pretty quickly. Now, the reason being is all about aerodynamics. Where this Model 3 was really built and designed to maximize its efficiency, this i4 was built on the 4 Series Grand Coupe, which was always going to be some level of aerodynamic. Nobody makes bricks, but it wasn't so much a direct focus of the entire creation of this vehicle. What we do get on the i4 that we don't get on the Model 3 is a lift back versus a trunk. And this lift back means that getting access to and basically loading the car is going to be a whole lot easier. As you can see, I have my stuff over in this one, and it was just because it was easier for me. And that's the one thing I wish the Model 3 had, was a bigger opening, because there is quite a bit of space in here. And from a quick glance, it's just a hair more than we get over here on the i4. But if I want to load my bag in and out, I can lift it up straight out, where over here, I have to reach in and pull it out. It's a very small change. It's a very small difference. The fact is that this probably has more cargo volume if we were to fill it all the way up. The point being that this space is a little more practical to use, but there's more in here. And just a small reminder, this is still the smaller car. Now, it's also worth noting that here in the rear, both of these vehicles have a rear motor, which means that some of the space under the floor is going to be taken up. But both of them do have storage underneath. It's just that the Model 3 has a lot more storage, where I can fit that backpack in there, no problem. Where on the i4, well, it's got a subwoofer, which my Model 3 does not, but it also has just enough room for basically your fix-a-flat kit. And again, that's one of those things where this is all sleek and sexy, and this one's all really practical. Now let's hop into the Model 3 and take a look at what it's like to be the driver, because presumably, if you're the one who bought the car, you're the one who's driving it. And this display, this layout, is really one of a kind, unless you buy another Tesla. And more companies are starting to mimic it, but really the idea here is minimalism. Whether you believe it's minimalism or cost cutting, whatever your personal beliefs, the fact is there's not a lot going on that you can see, but there's a lot happening in this screen. And this screen is one of the largest in the industry, depending on how you measure it. The fact is that everything I need to do is going to be built into this screen or available via voice command, though that voice command will only work if you have cell reception, because it's all cloud-based, meaning that if you are out of range, you are out of luck. So let's take 1 second to count my physical buttons. Well, I've got 2 knobs here. They go up and down, they click left and right. I can also click them in. And the fact is that these are going to do most of my functions. I also have an emergency light, and well, that's about it. So if you don't want a whole lot in front of you, then this is a great way to do it. But the trade-off is that you then have to look over to your right, which is out of your line of sight of the road, to see things like your speed, which will be listed up here in the left, or your maps, which will be found over here on the right. If that doesn't bother you, great, because then you have a very big screen to do a whole lot of stuff with. And this split here is exactly what you would find when you are in drive. You'll have maps or music or navigation or whatever you want over here, and on the left side will be your driver screen. For me, I've really come to enjoy and appreciate this, and when I get in other vehicles that are much busier, it almost starts to feel overwhelming. But I also know folks who want a whole lot more in front of them and physically in front of them than this. Over here in the BMW, well, things are much more conventional. But the new age version of conventional, where I still have quite a few buttons and switches because this has a lot more features than a 10-year-old BMW would, but I also have a lot of screen real estate. So instead of a gauge cluster, I have a instrument cluster. And on the center screen, instead of it being where everything is at, well, it's just where most things are at. And this one also has the option of a heads-up display. So where Tesla gives me nothing in front, BMW will give me 2 different versions of things directly in my line of sight. One other thing that Tesla definitely doesn't have is going to be Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. And even though it's using Google Maps over there in the Tesla, I like the ability to be using my phone where I can do anything ahead of time, come in, and it automatically syncs up. Whatever podcast or music I was listening to, we're set and ready to go. If I want to make a call, I use the Google Voice just like I would at home. And the maps, well, the other cool thing that this BMW does is it takes this map, and if I have instructions for it, we'll put it right in front of me. So for folks who want things right in front of them, this even goes above and beyond what you'll find in most other automobiles on the road today. I'll make this backseat portion short and sweet. One of them I fit, and one of them I don't. So if the Model 3 is the benchmark, how does the i4 hold up? Well, in short, pretty well. There's a lot of things that the i4 does very well, and certainly some better than the Model 3. As I talked about, displays are going to be one of the main differentiators, and I have essentially 2 directly in front of me versus the Model 3 with 0. And for a lot of drivers, that is going to make a lot of difference. But that's not really what you want to know. It's how does it drive? And this drives incredibly well. Now, the one thing I can say is that this is the performance model, meaning it has the adaptive suspension, but that adaptive suspension is available on every model. So you don't have to get the top end to get a very adjustable suspension system. From comfort to sport, there is quite a bit of movement, meaning that you get a tighter, more aggressive, sportier suspension, and then a comfortable ride setting that's certainly not going to be punishing for anyone who wants a more enjoyable ride. You don't even need to get these big tires to get lots of grip, because this car is really well balanced. And sure, if you get something smaller as far as tires goes, well, you'll get less grip. But I suspect that it's still going to be at least competitive with something like the Model 3. Unfortunately, performance to performance, I won't be able to compare today, but something like the eDrive 40 or the xDrive 40 compared to a long-range all-wheel drive or a rear-wheel drive Model 3, I imagine this is going to come out just that much more comfortable, even with the improvements that have been made on this newest version of the Tesla Model 3. One of the other things I most enjoy about this model is the fact that this cabin is very comfortable. Now, you can appoint it a number of ways, and this one's on the more aggressive side of things. We've got carbon fiber here in the dashboard and a darker interior, but if you wanted something lighter or a little airier or some natural wood, this is a very comfortable place to be. The steering wheel feels great in the hands. This is the M wheel, but I imagine the 2-spoke design that comes standard is also pretty comfortable. The layout is much more conventional, meaning that you're not going to get confused where your turn signals are because they're in the same place they've always been. If I had to spend all day in a car between the two, I'm choosing the i4. When it comes to the Model 3, it's just a completely different experience. And if you want to know more specifics on the updated Model 3, I did have a chance to get my hands on one of those a few weeks ago, so check the link in the description below. But the Model 3 and Tesla driving experience is pretty much the same across the line. Obvious differences, but what's out in front of you is just the road, because even if you have the steering wheel, not all steering wheels actually cover the whole length of the circle here, but they also don't have a whole lot of buttons going on. And even the buttons they do have are pretty well blended with everything else. So for me, there's no distractions. Although for many, it's more distracting to look over to your right to see, well, any and all of your information. If you want something different, you can definitely find it here. But as far as how it drives, that's going to be less connected than you're going to find in the i4, but more connected than you're going to find in a lot of the competition. Because this is, well, to put it shortly, this is a little bit harsh. To me, that's because it's communicating a lot of information. It might not be doing it the smoothest, but that doesn't mean that it's not coming through. What it does mean is that it's not always the most comfortable ride. And what the i4 does is a similar level of communication, but it feels like it's better because you're able to interpret some of that just because of the suspension design, where it's a little bit more refined. But from behind the wheel, this is either going to be a great, unique, pure driving experience because of how little is actually out in front of you, or it's going to feel like a completely disconnected driving experience because you don't have all of your gauges, all of your switches. You don't have the same feel of a cockpit because things aren't, well, they're open, they're not squeezed in. And when it comes to a Model 3 versus an i4, it's really going to come down to you and what you want and what you like, because even though these are both four-door electric sedans that fall in the mid-size category, they provide just such different driving experiences. One is going to have more space, that's obviously going to be the Model 3, but one's going to feel a lot more engaging and refined, although it has the price tag to match, and that's going to be over than the BMW. The fact of the matter is that one of these is going to be a better deal than the other, but I'm of the mind that it's not a better deal if it's the wrong car. So if you can snap your fingers tomorrow, let me know which one you would rather have in the garage, the i4 or the Model 3, and why. If you have any other thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, leave those down in the comment section below. Find us on Facebook, Threads, Twitter, Instagram, all those other social places, and we'll see you down the road.